Back in the cave again. Another day, alive. Woke up alive again. Crazy. Slowly getting caught up in sleep, sort of. Now this thing is a 2-level, but whatever's gonna work. Now, what to start off with? Got a lot of emails. Holy cow! So in the morning, it's a bit of a ritual. Have coffee or tea or whatever in the morning with Sarah, and then I will go into my inbox and check out emails. And what I did today was I went into, I think, the Tell My Story at howtohunt.com. And what I do is I go to the very back page, the very first emails that ever hit that one, and I start moving forward to see if anything's missed. And I found, obviously, I always find a whole bunch. And I think there's one here. I don't know. It's unfortunate, but the title. Let's see here. Hold on a minute. Okay, so I found it. So this email was sent in 2020. And missed it. Not hard to do when there is thousands of emails sent in. And the title of this email was Deathbed. Telling of my encounter. Read now, Steve, in bold. There's a title that makes you go, shit. Don't know what it's about, but we're going to find out right now, right? How do I get set up here? 1 second. Here we go. Listen to this. Hi, Steve. I love what you're doing and who you stand for. Thank you. I sent this to you in June, but you have not gotten to it yet. But my time is short on this earth, as I am in last stage COPD. I am a disabled U.S. Navy vet. My lungs are shot from my service, working in the bottoms of ships with asbestos. I'd like if you would at least read it to yourself, then decide if it should be read to your viewers. I suggest you read it in advance before reading on your channel, if you so choose. You might want to edit some of the colorful but true language. I already took out the F words. There's no offended culture here. It's rather long, maybe 20 minutes, start to finish, but I believe you will find it a very unusual encounter. As when I was a child, I was grabbed by a large female Sasquatch and walked out of the swamp. Yeah, no shit, Steve. I'm going to copy and paste this chapter from my book, simply because I don't want to type it all over again. I've refrained from sending this to you for a year, simply because you said you were getting so many emails you couldn't keep up. How's it feel to be famous? LOL. But my time's about up, so it's now or never. 1973. I was 12 years old. I was born and raised in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, a northern suburb of St. Paul. I'm at number 6 in a family of 12 because I was a runaway, escaping abuse at home. I was sent by county juvenile court to a foster home and a farm in northern Minnesota, Willow River. By the way, Dave has 2 hotspots of missing people in Minnesota. This area is one of them. That was run by a sadistic, child-abusing asshole who tortured me and his farm animals on a daily basis. I won't go into details about the abuse or torture in this email, but you're welcome to a copy of my book, listed later in this letter. From the book, Chapter 24, The Monster from the Woods. I don't know what Dawn did with the bloody mess in the sheep shed after I stormed out of the barn that day, but I know what I did. I ran up the driveway and started running down the road in my duck boots. I could not get the red blood images out of my head, and I cried all the way up the road. You see, we got attached to the calves like they were our pets. Unlike the cows, they are little and cute. We named them, and they followed us around like puppies. We fed them with sucker buckets and cared for them every day and played with them. It was a total shock for a boy to see them getting ripped apart and eaten alive by filthy, screaming pigs. Ooh. I started running away whenever Don abused me. When I first started running away from him, he would catch me right away because I didn't know where I was, where to go, or how to get away. So I always just ran down the trail to the back hayfield, or out into the front field, or just ran down the middle of the dry gravel road until he would figure out I was missing, and inevitably come after me. Either on Thunder the horse, or with his rusty old 67 Ford LTD that had no muffler and smelled like a cow pie inside. I could hear his car coming down the gravel road after me from a long ways away, but I usually didn't go off but I usually didn't go off the road and hide. I just ran on the road until he pulled up next to me and slammed on the brakes. He would come flying out of the car, swearing and yelling at me, and he would go directly into his trunk and bring out a 10-foot length of hemp rope, tie the rope around my wrists and the other end to his trailer hitch, all the while yelling and swearing at me. Then he would drive me back. He would be in his car with his head hanging out the window, yelling back at me, saying things like, "You think you're so smart? You don't know shit, you dumb son of a bitch. You like running away, eh? How you liking that running now?" And he would speed up the car and a little more, from a walking pace to a jogging pace. I was pretty tired by the time he caught up to me a couple of miles down the gravel road from the farm, so I couldn't keep up running behind for very long. I would eventually fall and start screaming, but he wouldn't stop. And he would drag me the rest of the way back to the farm down the gravel road. That damn gravel left more cuts and bruises on me than I thought possible, and I would be sore for a week. At 61, my back and legs still bear the scars, and the whippings and beatings and torture would begin again. Oh, this is killing me. I'd made a plan in my head. The next time I was going to run off the road across the swamp and get into the woods. Screw him. But I was afraid of the woods and the swamps that were on both sides of the road. I would guess there was about 30 yards of swamp, maybe less, that ran right up to the thick woods. I don't like swamps or woods around Don's place, since the raspberry patch monster chased me out of the woods a few months ago. See the chapter called The Raspberry Patch Monster in the book. I was super cautious. I now know why I was so afraid of the swamp, and it's because I had heard loud howls, whoops, breaking tree branches, and strange noises that I couldn't explain whenever I was near the woods or running along the same area on the road. There was something weird going on in there. I heard it. I sensed it, I felt it, and I was afraid. But this time I shrugged the noises and feelings off, assuming it was just the unknown local wildlife, and jumped down into the wet ditch when I heard his car coming up the road about a mile back behind me. I was right where the noises always come from in the woods, but I didn't care. Had to go now, or he would see me and capture me, and probably make me clean up all the blood in the sheep shed. Oh God, I can't go back there. Not there. On this road, there were no other farms or houses. It was very desolate. Just heavy wooded forest with a 30-yard strip of swamp on both sides of the 5-mile gravel road. So I jumped off the right side of the road and down into the swamp, and I started heading across this swamp, hoping to cross it to the tree line and into the forest that is beyond the swamp. It's a state forest, and it extends for many miles in all directions. I knew I was going to be soaking wet by the time I got over to the woods, but it would be worth it to get away from him. The water's getting deeper and muckier with every step I take, and I'm panicking and struggling to get through the swamp before Don's car gets to where I am. My feet are sinking and sticking in the mud, the muck, and I'm struggling every step to get my feet out with my boots on. I'm wearing those tall green rubber duck boots that farmers wear. I'm quickly realizing that it's too deep, and I'm not going to be able to cross this swamp to the tree line beyond it. The water is higher than my boots now. The mosquitoes and deer flies are thick as hell in here, and I'm getting eaten up. Don's car comes. I duck by the cattails, and his car slowly goes by. He didn't notice me about 15 yards out in this swampy area, so I have avoided him for the moment. But I know he will turn around at the highway about 5 miles up and come back, like he always does. Now I'm stuck in the swamp and struggling to keep my boots on, and it's getting deep. It's up to my chest now, and I wonder how I will keep my head afloat, if it gets any deeper. And if I will even make it to the woods. I'm panicking, I'm sinking, my feet are stuck in the muck up to my knees. My boots are full of muck, and the water above the muck is up to my chest. The more I struggle, the more I sink into the swamp muck. I'm pulling at the cattails and reeds, and I'm screaming and crying out loud, wishing Dawn had seen me, because a beating is better than drowning. I realize that I'm all alone, and that no one would ever know I was in this swamp. Now I'm really freaking out, and as my screams get louder, my panic increases. I get a few more struggled steps, and I'm now up to my neck. I'm crying out loud now, and the swamp water's in my eyes and in my mouth. And all of a sudden, from the woods, I hear the sound of branches and trees breaking and something heavy stomping through the forest. Crash, 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 and then a splash. I look up expecting to see a bear or something because it sounded like a herd of buffalo was blasting through the trees. About 30 feet away from me, on the edge of the swamp, is a what am I seeing? It's a monster. It's at least 9 or 10 feet tall and it is massive. It is huge. I've seen a lot of monster movies and this is a monster. It's just standing there breathing hard looking at me. I notice right away, whatever it is, it's a female because of the large hairy breasts. Weird how a 12-year-old beginning puberty will notice breasts even on a monster. But breasts or not, it is huge. It's a huge hairy monster. And I'm screaming and struggling and I'm sucking in the swamp water and choking and I know I'm going to drown. I stop struggling in the direction going away from the road. I stop struggling in the direction going away from the road and turn away from the monster and start struggling back towards the road. But I can't get my boots loose of the muck. After pulling so hard, I was seeing stars. I was finally able to pull both my feet out of my muck-filled duck boots, one at a time, and get a few more steps, as this huge, brown hairy monster starts coming straight towards me. Then I realized my mistake. Without the boots to somewhat support my feet in the muck, my tiny slippery little feet slide even further into the muck, under the water with the weight of my body, and I'm up past my mouth in water. I'm dizzy from struggling and screaming and panicking. I have stars spinning around inside my head, my lungs are burning, and I'm choking on the swamp water in my mouth. This monster is almost on top of me now, but it never made a noise. No growling, roaring, nothing. It seemed to glide when it walked effortlessly through the swamp towards me. The swamp water seemed to only come to its knees. As it got to within about 5 feet of me, I thought for sure it was going to just rip me apart or kill me and take me to its babies for dinner. But it did not. I was cowered down with my hands and arms over my head and my face in the water as the shadow of this beast surrounded me. And all of a sudden, even through the water, I noticed this terrible stench. Like a box of long dead skunks mixed with dog poop, ammonia, and barf on top of all that. Worst thing I've ever smelled, ever. My father owned a garbage company when I was a boy, and trust me, I've smelled the worst things you can smell, and this beast smelled worse than the worst thing I've ever smelled. And that's saying a lot. Then everything got silent. The creature was standing over the top of me, just staring at me. I was face down in the swamp with my hands over my head and my eyes closed tightly, crying and coughing and spitting up swamp water. Then I heard this beast make a long exhale like a sigh. Like it felt compassion or had a moment of weakness or something. Hard to explain the emotion, but we both just froze for a moment, except for my choking. The swamp was completely silent. Excuse me. Like someone plugged my ears. It was like this beast woman was trying to decide what to do with me. Had the appearance of a wild animal, a monster, but its eyes had an intelligence to them. Dare I say, like a human? In that moment, I realized she was so much more than just a wild animal. She/it took another slow step closer to me, and I felt its cold, wet, mucky, hairy hand. Cold. Interesting. Point, right? Slowly grabbed the back of my jacket and my neck and pulled me straight up out of the swamp. Gosh, it was strong. I had long hair, and when it grabbed my jacket at the back of my neck, it got some of my hair in its fist, and it was ripping the hair out of the back of my neck. I'm swinging my little fists above and behind my head, hitting this beast on his forearm, but it was like hitting a log with hair on it. It was so rock hard and muscular. I've never been so afraid of anything in my young life. Not Dawn or any of the other monsters. This monster scared me so bad, I started peeing my pants. And as I felt the warmness of my urine running down my leg and my wet jeans, I started kicking and flailing my feet and twisting my body around to get loose. But it had me tight in its strong grip. Its fist was bigger than my whole head. The more I struggled, the more my hair was getting ripped out. It effortlessly held me out in front of it. The best way to compare this beast's size to my own is if you can imagine holding a large rabbit by the skin or the fur of the neck out in front of you. I was the size of the rabbit next to a large man. I'm sure it must have been 10 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide at the shoulders or more. So I'm screaming and crying and swinging around helplessly, but facing away from it, or being held out in front of it by my hair and the back of the collar of my coat. She takes one slow and cautious step towards the road at first, stops, looks around, then starts moving swiftly and smoothly towards the road. Its gait and the fluidness of its motion was so foreign to me. She didn't step so much as she glided, or seemed to slide each foot forward without the rest of the body moving. Next time you're walking, pay attention to how your whole body moves up and down with each step. This creature's body did not move up and down as it walked. Its legs moved independently from its upper body. It was almost like being on an escalator or one of those walking sidewalks at the airport. Do you know that feeling? Like the surrounding scenes are moving way faster than your actual steps. Like you're on roller skates when everyone else is not. I don't know, that's the best way I can describe that motion or feeling of it walking. It seemed to only take about 10 seconds, and we were back at the edge of the ditch next to the road. It took me about 5 minutes to get out there and in trouble, struggling all the way, but it moved smoothly and quickly back to the gravel road in a matter of seconds. She/it stopped at the ditch. It looked left, then right, waited for a second or two, then tossed me into the wet ditch on her left side with her right arm, while she's still facing the road. Then she turned her body to the left, facing me, and just looked at me. I was so afraid to look at this creature's face. So I laid where she threw me in the wet, swampy ditch and kept my arms and hands tightly wrapped over my head, only peeking out and up to her face a couple of times, wondering what it was going to do to me next. What I saw in her face was not mean, but firm, in control, confident. She was looking past me up the road. Then she turned her whole body to her right and looked up the road where dawn would be coming from. Then she turned back at me, then up the road, then back at me. This was no animal I ever heard of. It looked more like a human than a monster. It cocked its head to one side and looked straight into my eyes with a look of sadness and confusion, then of frustration. In its face, I saw another person with feelings and emotions, not a flesh-ripping monster. Other than a dog, what animal has emotion in their faces and eyes and compassion? I distinctly saw compassion in this monster's face. I would look at her, then cover up and look down, then at her, then down again. I looked quickly at her face and I saw her rocking anxiously from side to side. Then its face tensed up and grimaced, and I saw her face turn to anger. So I quickly covered my head again because I thought maybe it was going to attack me because I was looking at her. And that's when I distinctly heard her say to me in my brain, not in words, "If I had let you drown, you would just bring trouble to my land." How to explain that? I heard her emotions like she was speaking, but it was not speech. It was an emotion, a forced emotion. Again, she turned her head and shoulders together and looked up the road. That's when I just began to hear the sound of Dawn's loud car coming slowly back down the gravel road about 3/4 of a mile away. The creature turned and looked at me again and huffed, and immediately turned around and walked back into the swamp the same way it brought me back. It walked firmly and confidently back through the swamp to the tree line, stepped up from the swamp and into the woods, and with a few more crashes and crunches of breaking branches, she was gone. Holy crap. I'll try and explain what I remember about what she looked like. What I can tell you about the face is that she first reminded me of a carnival, bearded lady. I know how silly that sounds, but that is what she looked like to me. A 12-year-old, scared shitless kid who only saw a beard on a lady in a carnival once. She really did not look like a woman, other than the breasts and the motherly emotions she was displaying. She had long, wet, dirty, tangled, dark brown hair draped in front of her eyes and nose, but it was in little tendrils and easy to see through. The top layer of her hair was a lighter brown in spots, sun-bleached, and was curled or hanging in thick strands like dreadlocks all around her head. The hair was matted and dirty. The hair hung off the bottoms of her arms and sides about 5 inches like an orangutan. And with a long dirty beard that seemed to start under her eyes, and went down and merged with the mustache and continued to flow all the way off the chin into a beard of at least 6 inches long. And the hair was full of dried brown pine needles and twigs, bugs, and clumps of mud. I'll never forget the skin. It was dark gray, sort of like a gorilla, and her hands were huge and thick with long nails that were streaked brown and black and very dirty and chipped. Huge, dark brown to black eyes, dark, deep set, without whites that I could see. The brow ridge was pronounced and made her eyes angry looking, but not angry at me. And the nose was wide and flat like a boxer or something, but not human. The nasal openings were oval slits. If I had to pick a Bigfoot type that she most resembled, it would be the big, huge build of Patty, the Patterson-Gimlin film, 1965, but with much longer, messy, dirty hair. Well, that's about all I could see. The feet were big, of course, but in proportion to her legs, which were wide and covered with hair and mud. I couldn't really see much about the feet because they were standing in a swamp and her feet were squished down below the muddy waterline, so I only saw the ankles, and they were covered with mud and dirt and hair. So, Don pulls up a few moments later and saw me laying in a puddle in the ditch crying, and he yells, "There you are, you sorry son of a bitch. Why are you all wet and laying in the mud?" He gets out of the car and looks at me closer and yells, "Where are your damn work boots?" He takes a couple careful steps down the slope into the ditch and grabs me by my wet jacket and yanks me up out of the ditch and drags me over to the car and screams, "You stink, boy. Where have you been? You smell like you've been out sleeping with skunks." I was crying in that little spurt way, and my words were coming out one syllable at a time. I'm sobbing as I do my best to answer him. I don't know where my boots are. I fell in the swamp, and a thing. It was the monster. I could not. I keep sobbing and not making sense when he immediately gets impatient and interrupts me. "Shut up. You're not sitting in my car stinking like that. Get in the damn trunk," he snarled as he stuck his key in and opened the trunk and pointed towards it. "Get in." I was cold and wet and shaking uncontrollably, probably in shock. My eyes were burning from the swamp scum and the stinking ammonia/skunk smell in my clothes. I tried to control my sobbing, but my teeth chattered as I cried. I slowly climbed to the dusty, dirty trunk with the spare tire and tools, and he slammed the lid down and it banged on my head. Don drove me back to the farm, as he has done many times before. I was surprised that he didn't drag me this time. He'd made me throw the jacket away. We couldn't get the smell out of it, and he blew it off that I somehow got tangled with a skunk, a dead skunk. And he called me stinky for a few days, but I didn't care. I didn't plan on sticking around there much longer anyways. I ran again as soon as I had another opportunity, and that time I made it all the way to the highway and got help from the Willow River town constable. He knew all about me, Don and his abuse of me. What about that? What about that pisses a guy off? The whole town knew. The teachers, the parents, but no one ever said a word. I was just shy of a year. I was there just shy of a year. They brought me back to the cities and I was not sent back. Why those people aren't just eliminated by fathers, men, I don't know. I never told anyone about the Bigfoot. Who would believe me? Hell, if no one would believe me about the abuse I suffered from Dawn, with my layers of bruises and cuts looking them in the face, you really think they're going to believe a troubled kid telling a story about a monster that pulled him out of the swamp? No way. I dealt with the never-ending nightmare about Dawn, the bloody calves and pigs, but mostly of the monster all my life. I can still see the creature's face looking at me, with its head tilted to the side, confused and angry, but not at me, but probably wondering why I would stay where I was treated so poorly. Or maybe she was concerned and confused about the violence our species seems to inflict upon its own. And maybe it was none of those things, as she was just curious about me, like a kid with a new bug in a glass jar. Until I started searching the internet and seeing creatures and monsters I really just thought monsters were in movies, and that all of what happened to me could never be true, or the cops or the government would have told us, warned us, like they do about grizzlies, sharks, and alligators, right? Well, my mind had shut down and did not allow me to remember most of what happened to me as a child, abuse and torture included. It was only after I was about 25 when I stopped running from the fear of the darkness, my sleep, and the black hole in my memory that only showed itself in nightmares that I finally started to get those memories back. It was horrible to me to have someone, something, or some place all of a sudden remind me of a trauma I suffered years earlier. I thought I was going crazy, so I tried my best to keep those crazy, scary thoughts hidden with drugs and booze and relationships, hot rods, or traveling. None of it stopped the ever consuming thoughts and fears that I had, wondering and fearing what I would remember next. In 46 years, I have never gone into the woods again. No camping in tents, no trail hiking, no fishing from shore, no way. She may have saved me, but it also meant there were monsters in the woods in Minnesota and lots of other places. No, the woods were and are a frightening place for me. That's where they keep the monsters, the big freaking monsters. Those who knew me when I was about 14 know that I was the quiet, shy kid who spent all his time in the library. I was obsessed with finding out what I'd encountered and what it was called, but I was constantly frustrated at not finding what I saw. At home, I was the only one who was always looking into and studying the World Book Encyclopedia, 20 volumes, always looking for answers to unasked questions. I was looking for a needle in a world of haystacks, but I didn't even know what a needle looks like. In those days, there was not much in libraries about Sasquatch, and there was conjecture about the Yeti, but that was on the other side of the world from me, and I didn't even know then what I was looking for. I was looking at monkeys and gorillas and apes, bears and the like. I did not even realize I had an encounter with a Sasquatch until I was in my 40s and found them on the internet. But even seeing the many grainy, out of focus pictures and videos of these damn things, as you would say, Steve, I was unsatisfied. I did not see one picture that was exactly like what grabbed me when I was a child. Sure, some were close, but longer hair, some with long hair, but not on the face. I spent the better part of 10 years constantly looking into and listening to encounters, podcasts, movies, etc. It is an obsession that I cannot remove from my mind. I know I had several encounters with the Sasquatch, but it was crazy to even try and get someone to listen. So I figured I'd take the story to my grave. Well, almost. And you know what, Steve? When I was a young guy of about 10, my friend and I trapped muskrat, mink, fox, etc., and we loved the woods. It was all stolen from me in 5 minutes when I was 12. I'm 61 years old in the last months of my life, and I have late-stage COPD. I'm on disability from the Navy. I live alone in a small town in the middle of nowhere, on the vast prairies of northern Minnesota near North Dakota. Perfect. Not a forest in sight. Steve, I only sent you my encounters because I trust that you and your listeners will believe it, or should believe it. Sasquatch are not all ruthless killers looking to kill humans. They just want to be left alone. I wrote a book a couple of years ago when I was very ill, only so my 3 children will know why I've been so damn weird all my life. It includes 2 other encounters and so much more. It's published on Amazon/Kindle entitled The Agony of One Child's Weeping by Tommy C. Eugene. You don't have to mention it if you choose not to, Steve. It never sold more than a few copies because I never advertised it or tried to promote it in any way. I, like you, Steve, could give a shit if anyone believes me. It's not about money. Amazon sent me $9 in 2 years. If I wanted to get famous, I would be on every podcast and site dealing with Sasquatch, or create one of my own 3. Or create one of my own or 3 to get publicity. I talked to Wes Germer only after he bugged me for 2 years, and I haven't talked to anyone else until you. It's because if I don't tell the truth of my encounters and abuses now, it will never be known. And every time I see someone comment about how Sasquatches are not real, and that it's all a hoax, I shake my head. I feel the thin patch of hair on the back of my neck and say to myself, Frickin' ignorant idiots. Someday, long after I'm gone, hopefully this species will be acknowledged and protected. And we, the knowers, will all be silently vindicated. Thanks so much for your time, Steve. If you got through this, thank you. I know how valuable your time is and how little time you have for long-ass letters. And by the way, Steve, I purchased your book and received it in June. I also purchased books from Scott and Dave, and your book is fantastic. Much respect to your grandfather. I'm sure he's looking down and is very proud of you. You're welcome to tell, reprint, forward, edit, or use this email any way you choose. You're also welcome to include my name. Submitted truthfully, Tommy C. Eugene, Northern Minnesota. Live, love, laugh, and give thanks, Tommy. There you go. I hope you're resting in peace, Tommy. I have a funny feeling you're not with us physically any longer, as this was sent December 18th, 2020. It sounds familiar, though. Did I read this somewhere? I read this back then? I'm not sure. Did I read it to myself? I don't know. Well, if I read it to myself, I would have seen the title and shared it with all you guys immediately, so. Either way, worthy, right? Hold on, my screen of my laptop is locked out. I don't even know if this is recording now. Yep, still working. Good. And there you go. It may take a little while, but it's heard word for word. The book's out there. If anybody's curious, I'd be somewhat curious about the rest of his experiences, but there you go. The naysayers, they're not even on our radar anymore, right? They're not there. Abusers. I got a real bad time with abuse of human beings. Real bad time with it. And that's probably a big reason why I'm here today doing this, right? Exposing the bad guys, sharing the truth for good people, and do what I can to protect. All right. Who else do we have that needs to be heard? And we appreciate the gentleman who just wrote in. I'm glad he had a family. Now, it's starting to pour rain out there if you heard some odd noise in the background. Cedar Strips corroborates Albert Ostman's Kidnapped by Bigfoot as a titless email. Steve, your video dated September 17, 2020 is interesting, especially about the oral history concerning Sasquatch taking cedar strips. I've seen those trees with the cedar strips taken. And I'm talking, I videotaped it. I might share it here. We're talking the middle of nowhere, near Garibaldi Park, British Columbia. At 28-minute mark, there is talk of pulling cedar strips. Those would be called CMTs, or culturally modified trees. It is most interesting and actually corroborates with the story of Albert Ostman, when he claimed that 96 years ago in 1924, he was kidnapped by Sasquatch. He saw cedar strip blankets, he told. Quote, on my way back, I noticed where these people were sleeping. On the east side wall of this valley was a shelf from the mountainside with overhanging rock, looking something like a big undercut in a big tree about 10 feet deep and 30 feet wide. The floor was covered with lots of dry moss, and they had some kind of blankets woven out of narrow strips of cedar bark, packed with dry moss. They looked very practical and warm, with no need of washing, end quote. This is the reason why sharing information and stories is so important. It is crowdsourcing, which allows us to put a picture together of what is going on out there. Our indigenous stories also contain traditional knowledge about them. Your buddy mentioned Canal Flats. That reminds me of the time I was up in the White Swan Lake area in one of the valleys back in 1986 when I was picking morel mushrooms. It was around June of 86, and it was raining very heavy. I and another guide climbed down the valley, crossed the river on a log, and found ourselves in a secluded area that was full of beautiful, large, golden morel mushrooms. My buddy was up the hill, and I found myself closer to the river, down on a flat with lots of trees that had been burnt. I heard a noise and turned over my right shoulder and saw what I thought was a bear pushing a tree over. I immediately picked up my bucket and quietly and quickly went up and behind the trees to go get my friend and get the hell out of there. I kept looking back as I left, but to my relief, it appeared to not follow me as I didn't see it again. All the trees there had been burnt, but I was under a canopy where the tops were still intact after the fire. The tree that was being pushed over must have been about 18 inches in diameter, so this so-called bear was pushing it over and was on the opposite side. It pushed the tree down towards my direction, and it would have had a good, it pushed the tree down towards my direction, and it would have had a view of me. I thought maybe it didn't see me, but in retrospect, I believe it very well may have been the only time that I actually saw a Sasquatch. I was told that bears don't push trees over. In a forest fire, it's not uncommon for trees to have their roots burned out and eventually fall over. I think that if it was a Sasquatch, it was pushing the tree over to scare me, so I would leave the area, and that's exactly what I did. From my vantage point, and the split second I had to look at it, it was large and dark with hair all over. It was standing on the ground on 2 feet, and the other 2 hands or paws were squarely on the tree as it was being pushed down toward me. It was probably about 100 yards away, so I didn't get a good, clear, close-up look, and I was too scared to stay there to have a better look. A few months after that happened, I mentioned it to the Kootenai Indian, Tunaxa man, K-T-U-N-A-X-A, Tunaxa man. They told me about that area. He said when he was there a few weeks before I was, that he heard what he believed to be a Sasquatch. He told me what he heard, the sound of a scream or a yell that was like that of a human throat, but definitely wasn't human. Well, that's my possible sighting story, and thought I would share, as I believe not many people can say they've seen a Sasquatch pushing a tree over, but it very well may be what I saw. I have other stories to tell, and will write in the future as well. Keep up the good work. By sharing with one another, we can collectively learn, and this has been the best damn thing for our common knowledge and understanding. I recently saw a video. The Sasquatch said, quote, "It is not science," end quote. That means it is perhaps more spiritual. That is what the orbs are all about. In any event, these stories are important, so we can know what we are sharing the planet with. Troy Hunter, member of the Tunaxa First Nation. I can't pronounce it smoothly, obviously. Tunaxa First Nation. Troy, I appreciate you, man. I hope you're still here with us. And if you are, I hope you did email your other experiences and what you've seen and know, because I want to hear it. And I've been in that forest around that lake. I went there years ago to help a guy in a grizzly bear hunt. Big cedar trees there, big timber, big, huge timber, vast areas of it. And that's not the only encounter to get emailed to us from that area. What do we got here? How much time we got? I got so much stuff to do. Second experience / wildlife preserve. Sorry, and that is true. We haven't had too many people actually see one of these people pushing a tree over. I'm sure we have had it written in, but it's not that common to have people actually see that go down, right? Second experience / wildlife preserve. In the mid-60s, we bought some property in the mountains that had pastures and room for a horse barn of horses. All of us, especially my 2 little girls and I, did a fair amount of riding the forest trails with the new friends we had made. My husband's new job called for driving big rigs across country, so he was not often on the homestead. One very hot autumn day, my friend and I decided it was too hot to take the horses out. So, we put all 4 of our little girls in the car, picked up some picnic food at a little deli, and drove up into the thick forest-shaded valley in the neighboring big mountains. The 2 closest towns were about 25 very rugged miles apart, with only this little, hardly used road connecting them, and no houses along the entire stretch road. It was desolate and beautiful, with high waterfalls and rumbling creeks alongside the road, and no busy people and noisy cars. And it was much cooler than our houses. We spotted a clearing with some old picnic tables down off the road next to a clear blue stream. It looked like it might have been a farm or homestead at one time, but long gone now. Overgrown fields and hills surrounded the clearing, with some possible dissolving wagon trails. The lunch food was set on a table, and we were unwrapping the meat when we heard some brush moving and something stomping. "What the hell is that?" I said to Martha. She shrugged. "Maybe a deer." I thought if it was a deer or bear, it's way big and too close. The girls were busy with the food and talked about getting into the creek when they finished. The brush noise got louder, and it seemed the ground shook with heavy stomps. I've been close to bears walking in our yard and didn't hear or feel their footsteps. Got even closer, but we couldn't see anything through the heavy brush. That's not a deer. I hurriedly gasped, and we all ran and scrambled into the car. We got out of there as fast as we could. Now I can't remember if we grabbed the food or not. It wasn't important. Martha and I never talked about that day, but I did ask my daughter if she remembered it. Quote, "That was terrifying, Mom," end quote, was all she said. But she did share with me that a Bigfoot who had a deer carcass ran alongside her car one night. Funny that I never told the picnic event to anyone, perhaps because I couldn't identify exactly what it was. It wasn't hunting season, and I don't think any man alive could shake the ground when he walked. I'm still not absolutely certain what it could have been, but another event that you read had a remark about feeling the ground move when it walked. I'm not a big fan of mysteries, and I don't like not knowing, but I'm not the one to do the investigating either. We appreciate all you do. We appreciate all you doing, Steve. Speaking just for myself, I am relieved to have these questions answered for the most part, and would never want the, hopefully, harmless ones destroyed. I'm sure time will reveal the truth on all of it. Thanks, man. Thank you for sending your email and your time. Appreciate it. And I'll bet you there's a whole pile of people here listening that would mind hearing from the experience of seeing one of these things with a deer carcass running along the car. That'd be a little bit of a moment, right? Now, what am I going to do? Had one of our trusted friends here who knows a lot about what the dark people have done to other people. Public names, especially a doctor. And he sent me a video he wants me to listen to. I wonder if we should listen to it together. He said where to fast forward. And a man is going to share exactly what this dirtbag doctor did with their DNA. Maybe I'll set up, I got another screen here that hooks up to the computer, and we'll just put it right here and watch it together and learn together and listen, right? So it's not just coming out of my mouth. We'll hear straight from the source. The man who, I've heard of the man who posted the video. I don't know him, but apparently he knows a lot when it comes to this topic and more. But more importantly, we get to hear possibly what this so-called doctor intentionally did to hide the DNA. Not to mention what he has done directly to Dr. Melba Ketchum and others, right? Which I got no problems talking out loud about, because I don't like helping bad people hide anymore. We were talking about that. Sarah and I were talking about that on the way home. Obviously, you're driving for 2 days. I'm done with the emails. In case I annoy the shit out of you when I talk, I'm done with the emails. There you go. And we both had dark, evil people brought into our lives by our parents when we were young. She had a real dark son of a bitch brought into their lives, and this guy basically tortured her and her brothers when they were tiny children. Ex-military guy. He used to, she said at one point he decided that everybody was going to get beat if one kid did something wrong. He used to make them stand in the corner and hold a stool up with their arms. And if they started trembling, and they were crying the whole time, she said if they started trembling and put the stool down, he would karate chop their arms and beat them. He used to get soap and jam it in their throats and scrub it on their teeth to make sure they got lots of soap in their mouth. The list went on and on. He eventually shot himself. Good day for humanity that day. But when we were talking about those things and things that I've experienced, I was saying to her, why do we help the bad people hide? We've all been guilty of it, right? We've all been guilty of it at some point in our life, of helping bad people hide. I don't get it. And we were both driving down the road. I'm like, I don't get it. She's like, no, I don't get it either. But I'm not that guy anymore. I haven't been that guy for a long time. It's amazing, though, how we will know what somebody's done or what somebody's doing to good people, but you don't say anything. And you'll see them in public and not say anything. Isn't it weird? It's very weird. I don't do that anymore. Some people might get offended from it or think I'm this angry person, but I'm not. I'd like to start a new trend. If you know somebody's bad, doing something bad, somebody's done something bad, point it out. See them in public, talk to them clearly, and let them know that you know, and let all the people around you know too, right? Some might think that's the wrong thing to do. I don't give a shit. I don't think it's the wrong thing to do. So what I'm getting at is when it comes to certain people who've been lens whores, right? Lens whores, trying to be seen and heard, trying to make sure that all of you only see and think the way that he or they want you to. I hope this channel has played a big role in that coming to an end. Probably taking a little while for it to come to an end. It's probably still hanging in there, misleading people and being a lens whore and doing dirty, filthy things to people in the background. But I like to think that we are exposing the wrongdoings and exposing the absolute truth when it comes to this topic and more. I know I'm babbling, but sometimes the babble needs to come out, right? So, I think, when am I going to do this? I got to go get my horses. I put them in the pasture across the road and it's raining. I have to go get the horses, bring it back, and then I will see if I can't get set up and we'll listen to this video together. There you go. I'm going to be back in a few minutes, I think. Here we go. Ready? This is from a channel called, this is KX Kreider Exploration, all right? So let's have it here.
And this is unique. And I want everyone to kind of place this in their minds about what they've been told Bigfoot is for the last 40 years. Basically, it's always been perpetuated as a big ape or a big monkey. And we've also been told that science doesn't accept this. We've been told that science sees these things as a myth, sees them as something that couldn't be real. I'm going to tell you that's not the view science has. This is called man versus ape, modern view curriculum and classification, because we get this straight from the modern curriculum used today in school. If you go for anthropology or whatever, this is going to be what you read. Our source is Through the Lens of Anthropology, 2nd edition, 2019. Introduction to Human Evolution and Culture, which is interesting. Human Evolution and Culture. Chapter 2, page 50. And it reads, believers should be aware that if they do sight a Bigfoot, they should probably leave it alone. It probably isn't a large human-like ape. If it exists, it's probably a human who wants to be left alone, and nobody should do it harm. Recall that if a primate is bipedal, as Bigfoot is typically reported to be, it is classified as human. Now take a real careful look at that statement. It probably isn't a large human-like ape. If a primate is bipedal, it is classified as human. Now, why for 45 years has the main PhD in this field been telling you that it's suspected to be Gigantopithecus, the big ape from Asia who crossed the land bridge, at the same time telling you that this is a bipedal primate, when every biologist, anatomist, anthropologist knows that if it's a bipedal primate, it's a human? Where does this come from? Why has a pro been telling you for 45 years this is likely to be a giant ape when he knows for a fact that it's not? He knows for a fact that it's a human. Why did that occur? And I want to tell you, we've been presenting this fact for about 3 years now, and now the narrative has changed. After 45 years, we were able to push it off and push it over, and now that same person says ancient human. He's gone from Gigantopithecus to Australopithecus. Ancient monkey, ancient human. We call that one a win.
It's Michael's lowest prices of the season. Take up to 60% off thousands of items like fall floral, decor, and more. Score huge
Trust the science. Oh, the real dark side, right? And we've been taught to trust the science. Which I do. I have great respect for academics. I have great respect for science and everything they've ever done. But being on the, not just the witness end of this, but on the full-blown research end of this, we've seen what happens. We've seen why you don't know what they know. And I've just shown you. Is the scientific opinion that these things are a myth? No, they're telling you it's probably a large human. Period. That's the scientific view. Here we go. There's hope. Science is going to take this serious. So Oxford University did a study, and as many of you might remember, that they were going to test Yeti and Bigfoot DNA for the first time. It was going to be the Oxford-Lausanne Collateral Hominid Project, an effort between Oxford University and the Museum of Lausanne, Switzerland, Museum of Zoology, get together, and they were going to see what the heck's out there. So they were asking for samples. They came to us and requested that we do some type of field study and get them DNA samples. We took it on. We already had one in file, so we sent it to them. It came back as unknown. There's the first thing you never heard about through the Associated Press, that they found anything that was considered unknown. Matter of fact, on the conclusion of the study, which they held the study for another 2 months, because our first specimen had no recoverable DNA. The hair was right, but they couldn't recover DNA. So they literally held the whole world. 2 months went by. Everybody waited for the results of this thing. And what their question to us was, can you get a specimen off a living creature? They wouldn't have asked us that if that first sample wasn't something. So we did. It took 2 months. But in the presence of a U.S. Forest Service veteran, an archaeologist, and 4 or 5 other witnesses, and finding the 16-inch prints I've shown you, the 22-inch print on our table, and 170 other feet print, and finding yucca fruit with bite and print with missing teeth, all these things accompanied the recovery of this hair, which was done with the utmost amount of care. Its transference was done in a hermetically sealed positive pressure chamber cabinet, camera inside the cabinet, camera outside the cabinet, absolutely untouchable. Its trace of custody was beyond reproach. There'd be no contamination. Everything was witnessed, everything was above board. So we submitted all of this to the study. What was the conclusion of that study? So much of the abominable snowman study finds the Yeti DNA belongs to bears. Okay, now we know this isn't the truth. For one, we've already had one that's sent back unknown. And what we were told at the end of this thing was the hair, the second one that they held the whole study for 2 months, mind you, was now being curated in the Museum of Zoology, Lausanne, Switzerland, for future study. That's bull. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Because, for one, any second-year biologist student can easily go get a manual and differentiate any bear, possum, dog, whatever hair from a primate hair instantaneously. You'd never even test the DNA on a bear hair. Why would you? It's bear. You can tell by the morphology of the hair itself it's bear. So why would you conduct DNA tests? They didn't. They lied to the public. They said that the DNA came back a mix between a type of a brown bear and a polar bear, some ancient species, blah, blah, blah. This must be the Yeti. Man, it's a real study. They never would have tested that stuff. And they didn't. All that was hyperbole. And the fact is, we can prove it with this specimen right here. That is the actual, if you guys want to take a picture or whatever, that is the actual sample submission number of that hair they waited for 2 months. Now it's being curated for future study, but yet they told the AP that every sample was tested and the results released. And I can tell you, they didn't release either a first specimen or our second specimen because this was never entered into the study, even though they held it for 2 months. And I say to you, because Brian Sex has now passed away, but where did it go? There's the sample submission number. This has trace of custody. That sample exists. And it can be considered a smoking gun. After all that fiasco, we were contacted by the University of Mexico Gallup. They wanted to take a serious look into this because they're on the Navajo res, and those people do take a serious note to it. They attribute part of the survival of their people and culture to the Bigfoot. During the long walk, when most of the Navajo were marched away from their homelands, they had to leave the elderly and the children behind. And when they returned from the long walk many years later, they found those people alive in the Chuska Mountains. And they asked them, how in the world did you survive? And they were told, we were brought up here and taken care of by the hairy man. So to the Navajo, these are the saviors of their culture because the elders held their memories and held their teachings. That would have gone away had it not been for the hairy man that kept them and kept them alive. So we did this. First off, we did a year-long field study as instructed. And then, when it came time to produce the results, two things happened. One was we had handed the DNA off, all the evidence, to Dr. Meldrum. And with instruction to get it to 3 domestic laboratories, do not send it overseas. This is because I've already, what I just dealt with. I just dealt with Oxford. And we just saw what just happened with them. So we absolutely instructed them, do not send them overseas. 3 domestic labs. So during a year, the year field study, we waited for results. Well, he never answered the phone. He never contacted. We never found out where was the trace of custody, the sample submission numbers to our DNA evidence. We couldn't get a response until we put on this event. Now, this event was formally proposed to notify and inform the faculty, other scientists and other teachers and things like that of the results of the field study. As well, we opened the doors to the university. They had the largest turnout at the university in the university's history, not only by a small factor, by over twice the populace they've ever had show up for anything. These were the local Navajo, because this is a part of their life, and they had a great interest to see how this was being studied and portrayed by their college. So we did this, and when we refrain to these things, we terminate, they're young and offspring. We don't call them their offspring, we call them their children. And it's interesting because the famous doctor in this got offended by that. He didn't like the fact that we were regarding these things as human. This is something that apparently, for some reason or another, was almost taboo.
Poor thing.
But you see here, his name's on here. We were bringing him in as part of this. But the reason we did that was because we hadn't heard from him in a year. Now, he showed up to this event, and he did his normal presentation on Gigantopithecus. And then came the time at the table afterwards to ask, where's the DNA? Where is everything that was submitted? Where's all the materials we handed you? While eating, in between bites, he just told me, I don't know. And he took another bite. And what the world? This is a deal. It's a full year we got into this deal. The executive director sitting there asking him, and I don't know is not going to suffice. I couldn't take it. So I literally said, what do you mean you don't know? Where's the trace of custody? Where did it go? Did you throw it in the trash? What happened to it? You know what he told me? I gave it to Brian Sykes. What? Brian Sykes is Oxford. Brian Sykes is the one that just screwed us. Brian Sykes is the one you were told. Only told one name not to give it to was Brian Sykes. But that's who we gave all the evidence to. Then you gotta wonder, this is a PhD. He understands trace of custody. He understands how these things are supposed to work. Why in the world we have done that? Now we have no data. We have no DNA. There's no sample submission numbers. There's no trace of custody whatsoever. There's no pro in the world that could do that on accident. It'd be impossible. So what do we see? A cover-up, a new deception. New Mexico University official under fire for Bigfoot hunt. Now, they were accusing the executive director of fraud. They said he spent taxpayer money. That's a big charge. That's not a little thing to be an executive director of a university and be accused of fraud. That's some pretty serious criminal charges. Their basis was there was no evidence from the study. So thanks to Meldrum tossing the stuff in the trash at Brian Sykes' hands, there's no evidence now to defend the executive director of a university, not a community college. This has got to be pretty serious. They did a 22-minute special investigation by a network news, declaring just how bad all of us were for doing this. They removed us out of the segment because I threatened the literal piss out of them, legally and illegally both. But they didn't remove our face, they didn't remove the executive director, and they didn't remove some of the people around the team. They destroyed their lives. This didn't stop. It continued. New York Post, university blew taxpayer dollars on search for Bigfoot. Here goes the propaganda. You notice the study didn't make the New York Post. None of the work we did made the New York Post. But the first little inference of a fraud, and somehow or another they get the news. And in the end sum, a state senator proposed law to ban the study of what they called a mythical creature. Mythical because why? We had no DNA evidence.
All right, I think we get the
There was
gist of it.
nothing physical.
Have you seen the title of the email of the video? And I'd urge, I'm going to listen to this. I'll probably listen to the rest of this as I'm completing repairs on my truck. So I got to get going. But there you go. Exposed again, right? Meldrum is a piece of shit. There you go. Piece of shit. Imagine, eh? Playing the good guy role for so long. Turns out you're just the bad guy, right? The bad guy. There you go. I'm probably going to be on fire listening to the rest of that video as I'm working the shop here, but whatever. I'm going to listen to it. Sounds like everybody, if you have interest, you should listen to it as well. And I strongly urge you, if you ever run into people that are doing bad things, misleading the people, misleading you, keeping solid, honest truth away from you, expose them. Ask them out loud, publicly, maybe on a cheesy Bigfoot cruise or one of those money-grabbing conventions. Tell them out loud you know exactly who they are and what they've done to the people, what they've done to innocent women, what they've done to help destroy the lives of honest, good, innocent people who are just trying to show people the truth. And they're going to do anything they can to keep that truth hidden from you, right? Including Mr. Wonderful, our fraudulent sack of shit, so-called PhD. PhD in lying. PhD in lying and acting. That's about all I see, right? What am I doing with those? All right. There you go. Shared. Now, what am I doing? I'm going to carry on with my day. Nothing new there for me. Nothing new there for me, what I just heard. But, and there's been a lot of people have had a lot of DNA samples over the years. A lot, right? The European guys claim to have over 3,500 samples for many years. Melba and the group had 114 samples, I believe. Right? What all came of that? Nothing publicly. Now we know who the culprits are. Some of them, right? Don't forget who the culprits are. Don't forget who lies to you through their teeth while looking you in the eye. Don't forget. Make sure people know who the liars are. Teach your children who the liars are. When you see the liars in public, call them out. Tell them you know. You know what they've done. You know they're a liar. Make them go hide. Withdraw and go hide in that dark little crack in a cave. Okay, I'm going to stop babbling. Anyway, there you go, you guys. Huge thanks to all the honest people who came forward today with their emails. Sadly, it took a little while to get to some. Club of No Return. Those decals are going around the world. Once you know, you know. They're available in Sarah's store. Link below, I believe. All you hunters out there who want true, honest knowledge on how to save you money and time and make you successful, my hunting app platform's been updated and will function smoothly. Thank God. That's available now, too. And a bunch of other shit. There you go. I will be back. Be safe. Do what you love to do this weekend. And make sure you do not take part in helping bad people hide.